I know what I was going to ask you.
What?
What's one thing that Papa always talks about?
Marine Corps?
The Marine Corps?
Yeah.
And what does he say? What does he say about it? He goes, Marine Corps. And then what does he say?
You too, Dad.
Marine Corps. Hoorah. Like that?
Yeah. Like
Do you know like why we have like an army? Like why do countries
to protect us.
to protect us?
Yes.
Who are they? Do you know who they're protecting us from?
Enemies.
Enemies?
Yep.
And do you know who could be the enemies?
Places on the other side of the world.
That's a good answer, actually. Like places maybe you don't know about, right? But just
Yeah.
And why do you think places around the world would want to like fight with us?
To take over more land.
That's a good answer too. So they want to do it because they want to take land. Yeah. Like, do you think like the soldiers they have to be away from their families? I think that's what you were telling me about the other day.
Yeah.
Like.
Oh yeah. Like, why would you wanna?
Yeah. Oh, that's what you said. So you said if you're in the military, why would you want to be away from your family?
I don't know. Why would you want to be away from your family?
Well, okay. So I'm going to tell you this. So I think they don't really want to be away from their family. I think it's just that's part of their job is that they get asked to go away and do stuff like that.
Wait, did they like ask him to?
Yeah, they asked him to. So that would be called like making a sacrifice. Have you ever heard of that word sacrifice?
Yeah, in Beast Games.
What is a sacrifice then?
Tough decision.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like maybe giving it.
Like it's like you have to like a sacrifice means to like leave something you love or like.
Yeah, I think it's maybe giving up something you love or like.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's a good way to describe it.
Well, I described it like that because in Beast Games there's so many sacrifices.
Yeah.
And then I really get it.
Oh, well, that's good that you put that together. So these soldiers, they have to go like halfway across the world sometimes and be really, really far away from their family.
At least, actually, you can't call them.
Yeah,
Or maybe sometimes.
Yeah, but they say that because the soldiers do that because they want to protect our country so that we can be safe, like here.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make you feel like thankful about that, or like do you think about that? Do you think?
No, I don't really think about it, but I do feel thankful.
Yeah, right. And I think when you get older, you'll probably learn more about that stuff. But I think maybe that's the key point here is that if soldiers do one thing is that they sacrifice a lot of things for me and for you and for a lot of people around the country, or everybody in the country, really. So that's pretty cool, right? Could you imagine doing something for like a stranger? Like something really nice, like to protect a stranger?
No.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. See you next time.
Bye.
Our guest today is a wartime veteran serving in the U.S. Army from 2008 to 2013. He spent over 5 years in uniform, facing the front lines of two of the most challenging conflicts of our time, his service taking him from the dusty streets of Iraq to the rugged mountains of Afghanistan. In Iraq, he operated as a military police officer, tasked with safeguarding high-profile officials in hostile territories. After he completed his first tour of duty, he decided to push himself further by completing Army Ranger School and joined the elite 75th Ranger Regiment, where he rose to the rank of sergeant. He led teams on high-stakes raids and special operations, captured and neutralized hostile threats while navigating treacherous terrains and unpredictable situations. Today, we'll not only explore the incredible experiences he had during his service, but also how he's transitioned to life after the military. I'm excited to learn more about our guest today, Brett Collins. All right, so we're hanging out. It's a beautiful Saturday. The birds are chirping in the background. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Southern California. We're hanging out in Brett Collins' gym slash garage slash man cave, right, Brad? Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, it's my personal space. One of my only spaces.
For the first time, this is the first time we're doing this here on the Let's Ride podcast, but we cracked a beer. It is a Saturday after all, so
yeah.
If we sound a little bit more relaxed, you guys kind of have an idea of what's driving that. So what's up, Brad? How's everything going?
Another day in paradise, as we like to say, but it's been good. It's been a good day so far, hanging out with the kids and stuff.
So we wanted, I wanted to catch up with you today. I've known you for a while, and I was thinking I've probably known you, I'm going to say 7, 8, maybe 10 years by now.
I think it's 10 years now.
And, we hang out, we have a couple beers, we talk, but I knew you were in the military, but I don't think I've asked you a single question about it in the 10 years that I've known you. And I said, there's something wrong with that. So let's make that right today. So that's we're going to get 10 years worth of your time in the military here in one afternoon.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I want to start with just all the way back to maybe how you were as a kid growing up. Were you, in terms of your behavior academically, just kind of set the stage for the type of kid that you were.
When I was young, I was good academically. Probably when I got onto high school is where I got into trouble, moving from Irvine to Ontario. Not a lot of white kids at my school. Probably not I don't know, man. I was a little brat, dude. I think most kids are.
Yeah. And I want people to know that aren't from Southern California. When he says from Irvine, so think of Irvine like perfectly manicured streets. Everything looks cookie cutter, like it's brand new. And then Ontario, we're talking about maybe surrounded by old farms and cow pastures, a little rough and tumble. Am I describing that right? Or I want to do it justice, but
a Hispanic neighborhood, just like, and not the worst, not like down 7th Street in Long Beach or something, like you see in the movies, but, definitely not a suburb, That's the best way to describe it.
And what brought you guys I think ideally most people will do the other way around. It's like, I want to start in a rough area and work my way to Irvine.
My parents were split when I was very young. So, that's a problem there. Another thing to get into, but I moved from my dad's to my mom's. So that my mom lived in Ontario. My dad lived in Irvine. He was, married and had 2 other kids. And I moved with my mom, which my mom lived in Ontario. And that's what sparked that. So for the most part, it was a good transition, but it completely changed my trajectory.
And how old were you when that happened?
About 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were maybe 8th grade or getting ready?
Yeah. I just finished 8th grade, South Lake in Irvine.
So you're actually getting ready to go into high school.
Yeah.
Which is like some of the most formative years.
Yeah.
And you're kind of coming in as this new guy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But do you remember, were you worried about that transition? Were you upset because you left? I'm sure you had made a ton of friends and now you're in a new place. Like, what was that like?
It was okay. I mean, I was always confident, but maybe I was a little cocky, but I didn't expect what was about to happen. Like, I mean, when I say that I was one of the few white kids at the school, it was, I was definitely not comfortable in that area, and back in that day, Irvine was just, predominantly white, predominantly Asian, and it was completely different.
Yeah. It's like a culture shock, basically.
It was. And people will tell me all the time that, damn, Brett, you're like Hispanic, because I know all the Hispanic food. I drink Hispanic stuff like micheladas and stuff.
Yeah.
And, I would have never gotten that.
Yeah.
Not being from Ontario. But the bad part is that I was always raised to like stick up for myself and not take any crap from anybody, and that's just the way I was raised by my mom and my dad, and it was consistent. So when I got to high school, what are the first things that, Hispanics kids wanted to do to me? It was pick on me. And I just didn't have it. So that led to a lot of fighting at school. That led to a lot of problems. And I ended up getting expelled from school when I was like in 9th grade. And
how far in are we talking? So you start August. Are we out of there in a month or two?
I was out of there within like 4 months.
Okay. So
like
pretty quick.
Yeah. And it was bad. I was in a bad place because it was almost like I was acting out. I wouldn't say I was acting out, but I mean, from a distance, you could say I was acting out, but it was more or less just, I did not say no to a fight. And that was my problem.
You weren't the one instigating it, but it sounds like to me, because you were raised to stick up for yourself. And you're somebody different. You look different. You probably talk different. You are different. You got a target on your back, and now you find yourself having to.
Yeah. Though, I mean, I could have walked away, right? And that's always the best thing to do. And I think that's one of the best things that you could teach a kid is to walk away. But I wasn't taught that lesson. Yes, I had a target on my back, but I could have done a way better job, and I could have been a lot more mature at that age, which I should have been. So I ended up going to like almost like an adult school after that. And then that really woke me up. So I ended up going to an adult school where I would walk through a metal detector before I had to go into school. And I was a smart kid. So I was doing like pre-calculus in 10th grade, once I applied myself to it. And then I ended up graduating when I was 17. I didn't even finish high school. I was like, you know what? Like, there's no way I'm going to catch up on credits and all that kind of stuff, that high school work back then. I can't even get into that, but I ended up going the GED route. And I was like, you know what? I finally figured out a path that I wanted to go. And once that clicked in my head, I was like, okay, this is what I need to do it. And that's one thing that it takes, I'm happy that I had bad influences to learn from that, because I wasn't a kid that was 19 years old, 20 years old, working fast food and lost and trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. At 17 years old, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I'm going to make it happen.
What was that you wanted to do?
The military.
Okay.
So I made a decision that I wanted to join the military. And once I made that decision, it was like, okay, I'm going to start running every day. I'm going to start doing push-ups and sit-ups. I started doing research on what the physical fitness test is. I went into the recruiting office. I like dedicated myself to it. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what's going to get me in the path of success and get me out of this neighborhood that is just a revolving door. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but my uncle was like a serious drug addict. So I would see that. And that was like, I mean, he's better now, but he had a rough life, and he brought that upon himself. But seeing what he was like in that situation and everything that he did and the way that he was on drugs like that taught me what not to be, right?
Yeah. So I just taking a step back for a minute is it's awesome that you recognize that, hey, I got to get out of this situation. I'm curious though. I mean, there's a lot of different things you could have done. There's a lot of different options probably. How did you land on military being the way to do it?
Well, one, education. I can get a free education. I knew the benefits. Like I said, I did a lot of research. So I was like, okay, I can get a good education. I need a GED to get it in. At that time, that's what you needed. Yeah. I mean, I knew that I like to fight. And say, like, I loved it to the point where it was like, okay, I'm a hardhead. Like, the military can put me straight. And my grandma and grandpa were still alive at that time. And I had a conversation with them about it. And that's what really took me towards it, because my grandmother sat down and had a conversation with me, and she ended up dying right before I joined the military. But she had a conversation with me, and she was like, if you don't get out of here, you're going to end up like your uncle. And, that's her son. So for her to say that to her grandchild was like, man, like I'm so thankful that she had that conversation with me, because once that happened, I was like, okay, the military, I can get out of here. I can travel. I can get an education. I don't have to go to war, and I did. But in my head, I was like, I don't have to go to war. I can do this. I can do that. Being young, and I don't want to say dumb, but having all this ambition, I was like, okay, I could do this. I could do that. And I kind of planned it out. I saw the military as not an easy out, but a way to give me structure, discipline, integrity, and a lot of things that I lacked because my dad just wasn't around as much.
It's really interesting that like what you're saying, because I grew up, I did not join the military, but my dad was in the military, he was a United States Marine Corps. And I grew up where and I'm not exaggerating, a day wouldn't go by that he wouldn't mention it in some way, shape or form. I had a friend up the street whose dad was in the Navy, and he would literally, my friend would talk crap about the Marine Corps, and my dad would grab him and put him like in an arm bar and like say, until he would scream, I love the Marines, right? So like, that's how I grew up. And then I remember going up into my parents' attic and finding his duffel bag with all his uniforms in it and pulling that stuff out and saying, dude, this looks sick. Like, right. And I put it on. I'm like, and so, I was getting near the end of high school, and I told my dad, I'm like, hey, like, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. And he said, no, you're not. You're not doing that. And I said, what do you, like, you literally like almost groomed me to do it. You would talk about it constantly every day, how much you loved it. And what do you mean you don't want me to do? He's like, no, he's like, you got too much going on. Like you're going to go to school and I was like shocked, honestly, that he was so adamant that I not do it. I guess I say that in the context of you had some of those I guess, did you have anybody like that? Or I know you talked about the education and things like that, but was there like a family member or something that was kind of pushing you along in this process? So it was just you, which is kind of interesting.
My mom said no.
Okay.
My dad said no. My dad didn't even know
and
until I was signed up.
What was their rationale for it? Like, why were they adamant?
Because I was joining in a time of war. And they knew, they knew better. They'd lived through, 3 different U.S. wars at that point. So it was like, whether you consider, those smaller wars, but, by this time it was, I think I joined in 2008. So we were in war for 7 years at that point. It was hot and heavy at that point. Yeah. So they knew.
So then what was it like to defy them, I guess? Right? You're just like, hey, I hear you guys, but I'm doing this anyways. Like, what was that conversation like?
Well, the conversation with my mom was the one, because I love my mom. My mom did everything for me. So when she told me that she didn't support the decision, I was a little bit heartbroken, and it hit me a little bit. Like I had to take a step back when I physically talked to her, and I was like, look, I don't want to end up like my Uncle John, and her brother. And I was like, I don't want to end up like that. I don't want to fall into that trap, or I don't want to work a minimum wage job. I want to do this, and this, when I broke it down to her, I was like, what am I going to do if I stay here? Am I going to go to college? Probably not, because I didn't like school. Yeah. As much as education is important, I did not like school. I just knew that I wouldn't apply myself to do anything. And I wasn't going to go through 4 to 8 years of school to be successful at something and get a desk job somewhere.
So I think that's the point I was trying to get across at earlier, and I didn't do a very good job of it. But it's, my dad said the same thing. He graduated from high school. And he's like, I got nothing going on. He tried to go to community college, accounting classes. Like, nah, it's not for me. He thought about doing that, and he was like, no, I need, he joined the military like the day he got out of high school, like really quickly. But I guess what I want to touch on there is, I wonder, why is it that people like in more, I don't want to use the word desperate situations, but more challenging situations see the military as that way out? And is there a scenario in which somebody doesn't have to be in that situation, where it's just like, hey, they come from a solid background, but hey, this still makes sense for me to go this route? Do you know what I'm saying?
Like you said, in your scenario, your dad was in the military, right? And no matter what he did in the military, he carried that out. And there's a lot of things that I do on a daily basis that I carry that out every day too. You didn't join the military because your dad kind of steered you away from it. Right. And coming from any background, if your parents support it and that's what you wanted to do because your dad did it or your grandfather did it and you were inspired, or you want to really serve your country, go for it. I can't say no to that. Right. But coming from let's say a less fortunate neighborhood, it's a way to make a lot more money in your mind than you would working fast food. And, a lot of people don't want to do that kind of stuff, and they don't want to go to college, or they don't want to do this. And maybe they didn't have good enough grades. My grades were okay. I could have done other things. I didn't even try. I didn't even try to go to college. I didn't try to do anything else. As like I said, I made the decision, something clicked in my head, and I was like, I want to do this. And like I said, I put everything forward. But for other people, that's an easier way. And for an example, I got back from basic training. I had $10,000 in my account. Never had that kind of money in my life. All my friends, I got back, going back to what my grandma said before she passed. She said, you're going to go, you're going to travel, and you're going to come back, and all your friends are going to be doing the exact same thing, while you would have had an experience that only 1% of the population had. Yeah. So, and that's exactly what happened. I got back, and my friends were doing the exact same thing, smoking weed, drinking in the garage, hanging out with each other. And I went to St. Louis, Missouri for 6 months and had a completely different mindset and learned discipline, structure, respect, a lot of things that I was lacking. Yeah. So did I fight at all when I got back? Not once, because I knew, I have too much to lose now. Right.
So I'm sorry I'm bouncing around, but I have to go back. to something that we didn't close up on, and that was the conversation with your mom.
Mm-hmm.
So you had said that, you know, you were not disappointed, but she wasn't as supportive as you would have liked her to be. How did you guys leave that? Did you just say, hey, I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to be disappointed, or did she come to terms with it before you left?
I don't think she ever came to terms with it before I left. I don't think she came to terms with it until I returned from training. Like, because I didn't see or talk to her for 6 months. That was the first time in my life that I spent that much time away from my family, away from my mom. I was an 18-year-old kid. So it's like a lot of my neurological wasn't even developed at that point. So she never came to terms with it, man. Until I came back from training, and she was so happy to see me, and the cab dropped me off because I surprised her. I didn't even tell her. Yeah, it was an awesome moment. And after that, I think she was more supportive because she saw the person that I became.
Okay. That's awesome. All right. So you went through basic training. What was just those first, like day one? Like, take me back. What do you remember about day one and just kind of getting acclimated with the decision that you'd made?
I never got to get acclimated. Day one was a lot of getting streamed at, going through my bags, making sure I didn't bring anything that's called contraband, which could be a lighter, which could be a food. You can't bring anything. Really, all the clothes that you come in with, you're never going to see until after basic training again. They get you uniforms, you line up, you go in a single file line. And I remember just getting my uniform put onto a table, asking what size I am. They're looking at me. They're like, nope, you're not a large, you're a medium. And I was probably 150 soaking wet at that point.
Yeah.
I got out of basic training and I was a troublemaker, man. Like I said, I was a rough kid. So I got in trouble so much in basic training. I probably did more push-ups than any other kid.
Yeah.
You know, and to the point where my drill sergeant, you know, and I found out my first duty station was going to be Hawaii. And he was like, you're going to deploy there. And he's like, and he pulled me aside, and he had another person I'm super thankful for, Sergeant Spalding. I remember him because he's so influential to me, but he pulled me aside and told me, like, if you don't change your ways, you're going to have a really rough time in the military. And that, another one right there, you know, another life lesson that an elder told me. I mean, he's probably 55 years old, you know, E8, E9, you know, actually it was an E8.
And for those that don't know, what is that?
Master Sergeant.
Okay.
So he's like one level away from one of the top ranks that you can achieve in the military, in the enlisted military. No officers, but so he gave me that advice, and he told me, you're going to have trouble over there if you don't shape up. And another influential person to me. So, you know, I think it's important that people understand that, you know, you're going to make mistakes and not everything's going to be perfect. But if you listen to your elders, and that's the one thing that I can take away, is like, that helped me a lot. Those kind of things, listen to my elders.
So you get deployed to Hawaii. That's nice.
It's a duty station. Yeah, it was great. It was great. Hawaii I didn't get to appreciate it as much, but Hawaii was great. Schofield Barracks was fun. There was a lot of good people there. Got to experience a lot of good people, and that's one thing that the military does give you, is the opportunity to meet people from all over the country. Yeah. Which, if you're from California, or if you're from Nevada, or if you're from New York, or if you're from Texas, and you've never left, you don't know what anybody else is like. You don't know what other people are like, you know, or what they're capable of, or what their skill sets are, or how they're raised, you know? So it was a beautiful thing.
At what point do you kind of decide your specialization? Because you mentioned, you know, combat experience, but first you were talking about Hawaii, which is couldn't be further from that, right? So you decide kind of what field you're going to go into, and just talk about maybe leading up to the decision, or I don't know how that works, to actually get placed into a combat zone.
Yeah. So before you get into the military, based on an ASVAB score, you can choose.
And what is that?
It's pretty much a test that you take to see what your intellectual level is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I took an ASVAB test, did pretty well. I had a lot of different options, but knowing myself, I knew that I didn't want to do a desk job. I knew that I like to fight, like I said earlier in this podcast. And I didn't want to do infantry because I had a lot of bad animosity towards people that did infantry. I thought they were dumb, and they're not. I don't want to say that they're dumb, because I ended up going that direction later. But I became an MP, and after that, military police.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, sorry for everybody.
We're all the civilians over here, right?
Yeah, I gotta level it down a little bit. But I ended up becoming a military policeman, which wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I only became a military policeman because I thought I was going to get a dog.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't work out like that. I ended up, you know, like I said, I got to Hawaii. and life was a little bit different. But that whole process, you go to basic training and you go to I went to St. Louis, Missouri, which is where a lot of MPs go for Fort Leonard Wood, and everybody there was going to be an MP.
Okay.
And everybody there went in different places. So I had maybe 5 to 10 people that went to Hawaii. So I was a very lucky person. I can't tell you how lucky I was, because there was other people that went to Benning. There was other people that went to, actually Alaska would have been pretty cool, but it would have been really cold. But yeah, Hawaii, you can't beat that duty station,
Sure.
Or Korea. I ended up going to Korea later for training, but I would not have wanted to stay at Korea for an entire year. I mean, it would have been a good experience, but no, that's too far away and you can't leave. Being in Hawaii, it's a 5-hour flight from where I'm from. And it's very, very similar to California, except for the rain. It rains a lot more there, but I couldn't have asked for a better situation.
So you decide you're going to be in the military police. How does that lead to a deployment into combat zone?
Yeah. So after I got assigned to Hawaii, I actually got assigned, funny thing, another one, I actually got assigned to, I believe it was 543rd. That was my first company. I barely was there. So I actually got assigned to a unit, and I got set up in a perfect scenario. And every single person that was in that company with me had just gotten back from Iraq. So I was in a perfect scenario to never deploy. Never. I would have never deployed. So I got there, I bought a car, I did all this other, crazy stuff, kept myself out of trouble, and started learning from all the specialists and E4s and stuff like that, and people that were above me. At this time, I was probably a P3, P2, which is their P4s. So they're like a year and a half away from where I was at that moment, a full deployment pretty much. And they all had combat badges on. You can tell that they were way more respected because of it. And man, I just looked at them with envy, man. I was just like, man, I want that badge on my right arm. I had a badge on my left arm, which means your company, that's usually your company patch.
Right.
And then below your flag, if you have a badge, that means you were in a combat zone. It means you deployed. So they all have a military badge on their arm, or a badge on their right arm underneath the flag. And that pretty much means that they deployed. And I envied that and I wanted that. And being around them, I could tell they were a lot more respectful. And I didn't know what deployment looked like. Right. And I was like, man, I love to fight. I love the idea of it. I watched a lot of movies and night vision movies, and combat is not like that. I had this idea in my head where I would go there and I would get a deployment in, and I would get super highly respected, and I would get fast tracked to NCO, and I would be in charge earlier. And I've always been this person that wanted to be in charge. I wasn't scared of the responsibility. I've never been scared of responsibility. I've never been scared to be in charge. So I was like, man, that's my way to do it faster, right? And gain that respect from other people that haven't done it. And if I'm going to stay in the military and I'm going to do this for a while, this is the best way to get forward.
How much of this stems from, because you're talking a lot about respect, you're talking about wanting to be in charge. Is this in any way tied to what you didn't have growing up when you're trying to prove something to these bullies from high school? Am I getting too deep here? Am I?
Honestly, no. I really, in my brain, I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to excel faster. I didn't want to be a 4-year E4, which is unheard of. I wanted to be a 3-year NCO. I wanted to be a 2.5-year NCO, which is an E5. And I wanted to get to that rank because I thought once I got to that rank, I'm in charge of a team. I'm responsible for these people. I can go on deployment and be in charge of something and have responsibility instead of being a robot. And it's hard because when you're an E2 or E3 in the military, or even a specialist, at points you're going to feel like a robot because all you're doing is stuff that you're told, and it comes from battalion down to company, down to your first sergeant, down to your platoon leader. And you don't realize that until you get up there. I
get that. I just, again, this is going to be my ignorance because I have zero experience with this, but, and people listening too that have no military experiences, we've all watched the movies, Saving Private Ryan. They're like, hey, this is about as real, quote unquote, looking as it can be in terms of entertainment value. But dude, I'm going to tell you, even when I go paintballing, that's just, you're playing, right? You're getting shot with paintballs.
It's not that bad.
I can, your knees are shaking. about poking your head out from around a wall and getting shot by a freaking paintball. This is not what we're talking about at all. This is not even on the same planet as that. So I'm just trying to like understand. I get like in your head building this story of what you want, but to get what you're wanting requires you to put your life on the line. So tell me more about that thought process of being like, hey, there's a better than 0% chance that something terrible could happen to me, but I'm going to do this anyways.
I knew that. And at that young of an age, that thought didn't even cross my mind.
Okay. So that's, it's like ignorance almost.
Ignorance is bliss sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And my thought process was, you know what? I need to experience this. And my thought process was, if I'm going to stay in the military long term, I need that patch on my arm. I need that. Like I said, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
So are you going over into, so I think you went to Afghanistan first, is that right?
No, I went to Iraq
first. And when you go to Iraq, you're going as a military police officer, right? So what is a military police officer like in a combat zone? Because I can understand that, like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you know, guys get in trouble for doing something. You're the military police, but now you're in a combat zone in a foreign country. Does the job description change? Now it's not so much about policing these people as it is about something else, or is it the same dynamic? Okay, so what is that difference?
When you're in what we call garrison, which means when you're in your duty station, Hawaii, right?
Right.
You do exactly what you just said,
right?
Which is ride around in a police car and act like a real policeman, play pretend cop on the military base. I call it pretend cop. But when you're in a combat zone, your job description changes. It goes off of what your MOE is or what you were assigned by the president or whoever. The Secretary of Defense, whatever they assigned your unit. And for us, it was doing military patrol in Tulil, Iraq. And I stayed there for about 15 months. So essentially, we had to do tower guard for about 4 months of that. And then the rest of the time we would do missions, which are rolling out and going with EOD and deactivating bombs and riding around and meeting with generals and, Iraqi generals, I should say, Iraqi generals. And we would take, full bird colonels out and let them meet with Iraqi generals and do meet and greets and sit down, and they would eat and they would talk about the village and how they can make it safer, and completely not what I thought it was going to be, like I said before. But, the funny thing about Iraq is not a lot of people get shot there. They get blown up there. So that's why EOD was super important.
What is that?
Explosion ordnance, something.
I forgot. Like defusing.
Yeah, they're the ones that ride around in like the bulletproof and bomb-proof vehicles, if there is such thing as a bomb-proof vehicle. Not really, but they ride around and they detect bombs and they deactivate them, or roadside IEDs. They're the people that do that, and we were the people that hit it and then either get injured or die from it. So that was our mission. It was literally doing meet and greets, patrols, making sure, going through villages. And sometimes I was just like, this is pointless. Why are we doing this?
What was it like? Never been anywhere. I mean, the first I've been is like Germany, maybe. So I can't even fathom what a part of the Middle East is even like. So
Third world, man.
Like culturally, this has got to be like almost like you're on a different planet. Kind of like, is it that foreign?
Yeah, it was like a different planet. Like they had some infrastructure, they had some highways, some paved roads. Where I was at, you had to drive at least 20 miles to get into the city, and you were surrounded nothing but desert and dirt. No paved roads up until that point. And then once you got into the city, there was a little bit of highways, a lot of people on the streets, on each side of the street.
Yeah.
We had MOPs, or method of procedure, to where it was like, if there's a car in your way, you make sure it moves, and we do not sit in traffic. We make them move and we go straight through it.
Yeah.
There's probably videos out there back in the day before I was in Iraq where people would literally rear end vehicles with Humvees and move them out of the way, because at that point it was just too dangerous to stop, not only because of firearms or anything like that, but just getting blown up.
Right. So you had talked about, this being a different experience. The way I'm interpreting this is you had built up this, I don't want to say fantasy, but it's like you built up this idea in your head of what you thought it was going to be like. And then you get there and it sounds like it was very different
than
that.
Different.
Were you like really disappointed? Were you like, dude, I made the wrong decision here? Or like, what was going through your head then?
I realized quickly that I was in the wrong part of the military if that makes sense. And I'll elaborate that as we go into the second deployment and what I did after that. But I realized that I was in the wrong profession of the military.
Okay.
I thought I was going to be kicking indoors. I thought that I was going to go after bad guys. Instead, I was almost like a babysitter for lieutenants and for colonels and for full birds and for 1-star generals. And those are very high ranking people that talk to the secretary. You know, some of them would talk to the Secretary of Defense. At the time, it was cool. I was getting a deployment under my belt. But, you know, after getting blown up couple times, after stuff happening to people that shouldn't have happened, you know, I quickly realized that this is pointless. Like, we're just riding around, and now we're getting, we literally, someone got injured and has to go home because of an IED blowing up on them. And, you know, it was like, for what? To go do a meet and greet with an Afghani general?
What's that like that's what I feel like, that's when things become really real, when you're there doing something that you think is kind of pointless, but then somebody gets seriously injured or dies. Like, I mean, can you recall your first time? Was there a level of shock there? Like, what was going through your mind when you're just like, oh shit, we're not in Kansas anymore kind of thing?
The first time that I saw an IED go off, I've never felt more adrenaline ever, even during my second
And just for context, like, where were you when that happened? And
I was on a dirt road, and an IED went off, like, I want to say 2 trucks in front of me, about maybe 100 meters, 150 meters away from me, in front of me. And I was in a convoy of 6 trucks, and I was middle of the pack. I think I was fourth truck. So I was near the rear and blew up the second truck directly on it. I've never had more adrenaline in my life, because, you know, they train you for how to evac that vehicle immediately. And that's exactly what happened. But they also teach you, like, to prepare for another threat, which is like people with guns ambushing you.
Right.
You know, that's where your training comes in, but it takes a minute. You're almost like shocked to the point where you don't remember what to do. And then your training kicks in. And you're like, okay, my vehicle's supposed to go here. This person's vehicle is supposed to go here. And then you just hear a lot of people panicking that have never experienced that.
Yeah.
But all the people that have experienced that are the ones that know exactly what to do. Right. It's a level of adrenaline that I never felt as much again, ever.
Even in other combat, because it's like the first time, like they talk about, like when you do a drug for the first time, is like the biggest high, and then you're always chasing that high kind of thing.
Same exact thing. Being shot at never gave me that much adrenaline compared to that. Compared to that exact moment. Right. You know, after getting blown up the first time, that was a wake up call. You know, even right now, I'm like thinking about it, and my hands are a little tremmy. But yeah, it's just like, man, it's hard to explain. It like I said, most adrenaline I've ever felt in my life, and I was scared. Like, I was legit scared in that moment. And then once everything else worked itself out, you know, and we were able to get around that vehicle, hook it up, and get out of there and get back to the FOB safely and get those people medevaced, I felt better. But I wanted to do everything that I could in that moment to, like, process what just happened.
Right.
And when I got back to the tent and everybody was there, I just sat in silence. And I remember thinking to myself, like, was that worth it? Like, that could have been me, you know? And I was 150 meters away from maybe losing a leg or having shrapnel in my leg or getting really, really injured, instead of just having like a minor concussion. Like, you know, the concussion of that blast literally blew through my truck. But what it did to them is catastrophic. So their truck was completely disabled, and my truck was still rolling, you know? So I'm thankful, you know, but in the past tense now, it's like, man, that wasn't worth it. Like, we were literally just driving back. We had driven on that road earlier, which is the scary part, right? We were literally just driving back from meeting a meet and greet, you know, and was that necessary? Like, did we need to do that? Why are we trying to play, you know, why are we trying
politician
to, kinda, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
You know?
So how old were you at the time that happened?
19.
19 years old.
Yeah.
So like most people, so if I think back to where I was 19 years old, I was at a frat party doing a beer bong, and like, that's kind of sad to say based on what you're talking about. But I think that's important context. Like, I was not anywhere near like ready to have that type of responsibility. I'm kind of speechless right now, to be honest, because we say kids can't even drink a beer legally at that age, but you can hold
a firearm and go to combat and die.
Yeah. Like, that's wild.
That's crazy. And one of the guys in there was 19 years old as well. Yeah. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
When you think back at that, you're like, man, 19 years old. And like, I think about that, and bad vibes in that moment. But everything after that, you know, it was a little bit easier. It was a little bit easier, I guess you could say. We still got blown up and, you know, it became easier and easier. But I want to say at least 10 people had to go home that deployment.
Do you think, yeah, so you said it happens once. It's a huge deal. I mean, the way you're describing it, and I'm looking for those of you, this is a podcast, so you're not looking at him right now, but, you know, he made it. I mean, I'm looking at you like you just relived that moment, like with the most amount of detail in your head. And that was one of the things that we talked about before we started this. So I'm like, hey, man, if I get into something or something that, you know, you don't want to talk about, like, let me know. Cause again, I've never done what you've done, but I've read about it. I've heard about people that, like, you guys experience things that 0.1%, I don't even know what the stat is, but a very, very, very small percentage of people experience in their life. And then you guys have to go on and live with that for the rest of your life. And you're saying this is 19. So this is, you know, a memory, you know, hopefully you're going to have, not hopefully, but like you're going to live along 60, 70 years that you're going to carry with you for those years, right?
Yeah.
How does that, just this memory in particular, but just your whole experience, what you and others have to do to, I don't know if it's like suppress memories or like digest them, like get to a place where you can just be like lead a normal life, even though you led for at least 5 or 6 years out of life, a very not normal life. And then you got to go back into a civilian or quote normal life with all these things in your,
that was the hardest part. I think that was the hardest part, is integrating back into society, into being a civilian, you know, and the military does a terrible job of that. And we're jumping like 5 years ahead right now, but the military does a very bad job of transitioning veterans from being a military member to a civilian. I receive money from the military every month now because of what I've been through, but I mean, and some people would be like, oh my God, you know, that's a lot of money to have on top of a paycheck. But I mean, the stuff that I had to see and the stuff that I had to go through to get it was just not worth it.
Yeah.
If I could do everything over again, would I not go into the military? No, I would still do it. The only reason I would still do it is because it made me a different person than what I was as a 17-year-old kid. And it taught me a lot. It taught me, you know, what you learn, and you asked about this earlier, is the third world country thing, right? Man, seeing that gave me such an appreciation for the country, you know, and where we're at right now, where people are like, oh, I'm going to leave the US because this person's getting elected, or this is happening, or that is happening. Like, you have no idea how great the US is, dude. Like, you know, no matter who's president, doesn't matter. Like, right. You know, it could be a dumpster fire here for 4 years straight. It doesn't matter. Like, it's still 20 million times better, because women in other countries have to wear masks around their head and get beaten to death for not doing it, you know, and men in other countries, if they're gay, get killed, you know, and that's purely because of religion. We don't have that here. You know, like we might have some discrimination. We might have people that are closed-minded or people that are downright assholes, but we don't have that, you know, and I'm thankful for that. And we have infrastructure, we have plumbing, we have houses, we have help for people that are, you know, less fortunate. And those people have nothing. Those people are living in mud huts or brick houses that are covered in dust and mud and have no plumbing and have to scoop out their own feces. Yeah. You know, that is what a third world country looks like.
You know, Brett, so that's one thing, and I've talked about it on this podcast before, which is my wife and myself are very fortunate for our careers and the lives that we've been able to build for ourselves and for our children. One of the things I always worry about is the balance of giving them too much and trying to find every way that I can to make them aware of how fortunate they are. I haven't experienced anything you're talking about, but I have an appreciation for it. And one of my biggest fears as a parent is that, yes, I'm very glad and fortunate that I can provide these things for my children, and I'm happy to do that, but it can't come at the expense of their self-drive later on, their appreciation for things. They can't become stuck up people with no respect for other, right? So it's something we all think about as parents. So, and I know I'm jumping around, but since we're talking about it, and since you've been through this, like, and you think about, you know, you raising your family, like, how do you think you're going to incorporate that into, you know, what you teach your kids?
I think the hardest thing, well, obviously self-respect, respect for others, respect for your elders, listening before speaking. Those are important things to teach your kids, and self-worth. But the hardest thing to teach your kid is the appreciation for what they have around.
Right. Like everything you mentioned with the plumbing and all this, you know, it's hard to connect those dots for them, right? Like they just don't get it.
They won't get that.
Right.
until they experience or they see it, or they, God forbid they have social media one day, but that might show them something. But social media it's so hard to get that to your kids. I'm still trying to figure out how I can do that,
Right.
and I want to teach my child to be thankful more than anything. And I don't want him to see a combat zone to make him realize that, especially my boy, my girl too, but having a girl, it's a little bit different. But with my boy, I'm like, man, like, I don't want you to have to go through what I had to go through, and he's in a different space. I was never in a position where my little boy is now. And I'm, like I said, just like you said, I'm thankful for that. But teaching them that aspect of life and being grateful for what they have, I think it takes a little bit of grinding. And I think it takes them being at the bottom or being broke or being less fortunate to be able to do that.
Yeah. And that's where so I'm going to give you a very materialistic example, but it was a wake up call for me. And that was, Adrian just got to an age in baseball where it's not just a little rinky dink bat. You got to start buying nicer equipment. I still bought him the lowest end of you can, it's just stupid how much money you could spend on things now. But the cheapest bat I could find for that age group was $120. You can go spend $350 for a bat for a 7-year-old, dude. Oof. And I'm just like, I'm not doing that. Right. I get him the cheapest bat, which is still not cheap, by the way. We're talking $125.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, he's going to see the other kids on his team with the nicer bats and just, right. And so it's just like, okay. And then I got to figure out how to navigate that and just say like, look, yeah, I could buy that for you, but I'm not going to. And here's why. And like, you got to be okay with that. Right. Kind of thing.
I think one way to help in that scenario, and what I would do, is make him earn it. If you really want something, make him earn it.
Yeah.
Make him work for it. Make him save up his own money. And learning the value of $1 is probably the easiest way to teach a kid how to be thankful. To them, $5 on a piece of candy while you're in the line is nothing. Dad, can I get this? Or Dad, can I get that? While you're at the checkout line at Target, right? And to them, that's nothing. But if they have to earn that money and then they have to spend their own money, that's one thing that I'm going to start early with.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned that. We just got him, my son, a piggy bank for that reason. I wanted him to save up his money from helping out.
And he's how old is he for that? So people know.
He's almost 3.
Almost 3. So, see, guys? So he's starting them real young.
I'm starting, you know what? I started awesome. I have my own issues. I'm not perfect. For anybody listening to this, I'm not perfect. I have high expectations.
We'll spend the next 20 minutes on how you're not perfect.
Yeah. Being from the military, and this goes into having kids, being from the military, I have high expectations of my child.
For sure.
And I think every parent does. They want their child to excel and they want their child to do good. But sometimes I find myself treating my 2.5-year-old like he's 6, or like he's Adrian's age,
Right.
And it's like, I got to step back sometimes and be like, he's not that old, and I need to calm down. And my wife catches me sometimes and she's like, he's 2 years old.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, but he should know better. And it's like, he's not intellectually there yet. He's not ready for that yet.
Yeah.
And sometimes they amaze you, you're like, holy cow, like, how did you do that? How did you figure that out? But sometimes it's just like, why aren't you getting this? And you have to step back and you have to realize that they're 2 years old. And just that expectation for children is so high nowadays. And I feel like the military kind of did that to me.
All right, let's get into your second deployment now. So you've got some combat experience under your belt. You figured out what you like and you don't like. And again, maybe for the ignorance in me, how does the second tour duty even come about? Is it something where, okay, you've done it once, you're good, you've done you kind of done what you need to do, you're good from here on out? Or it's like, hey, if we want to send you back, we will, or you volunteer for it? Like, how does that decision get made?
Yeah, so I volunteered for the first one.
Okay.
Right. And that's what led me to that. That deployment was purely because of me. I was like, okay, I had an opportunity. They gave me the opportunity and I said yes. And 7 other people in that company said yes. The second deployment, I had left Hawaii. I went to Fort Drum, New York, which is like almost like Canada. It's way up there, right outside of Watertown, New York. And I had just gotten there. I was an E4 with a combat patch on. I get to a unit.
Before you even get that, so let's talk about the patch, because right. So the whole reason why this happened, well, maybe not the whole reason, but one of the big reasons is you just told us earlier. You see these guys walking around, maybe walking like they're on a cloud. a lot of respect, and they're wearing this patch. Now you're the guy wearing the patch, right? So was it everything you expected? Was it worth what you had to go through to get that patch? Like, let's go full circle on that.
I wouldn't say it was worth it, but it was exactly what I expected, right? Okay. When I got to Fort Drum, New York, I got to a unit where not a lot of people were deployed. I was like walking on a cloud, and there was people that were above me that still hadn't had a combat patch. So I was looked at like I knew what the hell I was doing. You know what I mean? And I did know what I was doing. But I got to Fort Drum, New York, my contract was coming up, and I had asked him, okay, well, if I'm going to re-up, I want this. And I wanted to get out of the MP Corps. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I was like, once I got on that deployment, I was like, this ain't for me. I don't need a dog to do this. I don't want to do this.
Right.
So I requested that I go to Ranger school. And that was like kind of unheard of for MPs to go to Ranger school. You got to have a stellar PT score, which means that a physical training score. And mine was 300, which was the max. I was running 2 miles at that time in 11 minutes and 30 seconds. Ooh. I was doing 85 push-ups in 2 minutes. I was doing 90 sit-ups in 2 minutes. So I was crushing.
Let's see what you got right now, man.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Not anymore, bro. I'm almost 35.
All right.
Yeah, no, I was very, very strong, very, very fit at that moment. And I was fresh. I was probably 21 years old, right? So my back felt great and I was never sore,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I wanted to go to Ranger school and they gave it to me. So I went to Ranger school. Ranger school was harder than deployment. That was 60 days of not sleeping. And for those that don't know, the military only has to give you 4 hours of sleep a night, and it doesn't have to be consecutive. So that's the hardest part. Is I was used to like at least getting some, and I've always been a person that I can operate off of 4 hours of sleep as long as it's consecutive.
Right.
But not having consecutive hours of sleep, like they would literally tell you to go back to your bunk. And as soon as you went back to your bunk, you would hit the pillow because you'd be so tired. And then they'd wake you up in like an hour and a half. And then you'd stay up for another 7 hours and then lay down for 2. And then, they wake you up and then you'd get your extra 30 minutes later, and it was like, that was my life for 60 days going through, Hell Week, swamp phase, you name it. It was bad. That portion of Ranger school and Ranger assessment was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So I went through Ranger school. And then I went to a company once again that had just gotten back from deployment, and I got offered a team leader position because I had already had a prior deployment, and a lot of people that were NCOs in the Ranger Battalion or elderly E4s had deployments. I went to a unit that had just gotten back, and I got offered a team leader position. So then in my mind, I was like, man, now, and for those that also don't know, Rangers are like in the Army, the second highest level of expertise when it comes to combat that you can possibly go in. It's one of the hardest schools in the military, period. So you're revered. And I went through a little bit of training. I ended up going to Bangladesh for a little bit, and then I ended up going to Korea for a little bit. And then I came back to the States and did some training in Fort Drum and then Fort Benning. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready for my second deployment. And I did that. So I volunteered for my second deployment. I went to 2nd Battalion, 75th Rangers, and I immediately deployed to Afghanistan. And the reason why I did it is because I wanted to do it as a team leader now. Now I wanted to do it with me being in charge of other people, right? And experience what it's like to be in a combat zone and as a team leader and somebody that knows what he's doing.
It's done it. Yeah.
That's done it.
Right.
But this deployment was going to be different. And I was scared because, this deployment, I knew I was going to be kicking indoors. I knew that I was going to be on the offensive, not the little patrols or anything like that. I knew that I was going to be going after people. So that was different,
Tell me about, you talk about responsibility. So now you're a team lead, you've got combat experience, and effectively, how many people are on your team? Okay, so 3 people whose effectively their lives are in your hands. And you're how old? 21 years old. And you literally have the responsibility.
By the time I deployed, I was 21 years old going into Ranger school, going through all the process and changes and all the training. By the time I actually deployed, I was 22.
So I'm for perspective, I'm in downtown Fullerton, blacking out on $20 Thursday night, all you can drink. And Brett's
I'm a 22-year-old about to lead people into combat.
Yeah, right. Fair. Makes perfect sense to me. As compared to what I was doing. Anyways. Okay. Yeah. So you've got this massive responsibility.
I think that's where, and this, I got out of the military after this. For people that don't know, I got out of the military when I was about to be 24 years old. I learned a lot on that deployment because that deployment was bad. You know, a lot of people died that deployment. I lost my best friend that deployment. I saw things that nobody should ever see. Right. And I think that deployment is the one that put me over the edge. And I had actually met my wife during that deployment. I reconnected with her. I've known my wife since I was in 4th grade, but I reconnected with my wife during that deployment. And, I was going through and I was kicking doors in, and we were going after people that were harming American citizens. We were losing people. We were getting shot at all the time. We were landing in the middle of villages in a helicopter and just taking the village over, and you can see how that's going to go sometimes. Yep. The people that are going to defend themselves. Right. So yeah, it was an eye-opening experience. And I think about 4 months into it, after the, about month in, a lot of the adrenaline goes away and you're kind of used to it. And you're so tired and you're just beat up and you're, at this point, I don't have any free time. I'm always on call at this point. I'm an on call. I don't even know how to put it, but I'm a person that's on call to go either capture or, off somebody. Right. And the other people around me are the same person. Yeah. So it's a very high trained, you're worth probably $10 to $15 million as a person, as a Ranger. You've had all the training that the military has to offer. You work alongside Navy SEALs, Special Forces. I work alongside the best of the best people. So I got to do a lot. And when that happened, I don't want to say I got burnt out, but I knew that I didn't want to do it forever. Yeah. I was like, man, this is hard. Yeah. Not just hard on to do. But I mean, I was fine with the physical activity and I was fine with everything else, but seeing people incarcerated, to say it the nicest way, and then seeing your friends, I think what really hurt me was when my best friend Frank died. Yeah. And I had known him for a long time when that happened, my whole military career pretty much. So people will be like, oh, you only knew him for 4 years, but when 4 years in the military with somebody, I'm spending every moment with that person. Right. And I've never, even to this day, I've never been closer to somebody than I was to Frank. Yeah. I mean, I slept next to him for 15 months. I deployed with him for 15 months. I went to Ranger school with him. I went through my life in the military with that guy, right. And yeah, after that, my mind was still there. I knew I didn't want to get myself killed or something, right. But to lose your best friend and then the next day have to go out on a mission and, it was, I knew right then and there, I didn't want to do it anymore. And I was, I kind of checked myself out of the military. And as soon as I got home from the military, I was like, okay, how much leave do I have left? And, as soon as I got home from deployment, I should say, because I spent 9 months there. As soon as I got home from deployment, I knew right away. I was like, I need to take leave and I want to do this and I want to do that. And I want to get out of the military as soon as I can. And, it made transitioning a little bit easier for sure. Yeah. For those that don't, obviously none of us have any sort of clue in a lot of detail about how the first deployment was. This was very different. And now you're talking about, like you said, landing in helicopters in villages and kicking down doors. And is there, again, without getting into too much detail if you don't want to, but just to give people a better sense of what an experience of that is like being literally face to face with enemy combatant or just people that don't want you there and just having bullets shot towards you or in your direction. Or I don't want to say we're landing in the middle of a 360, right? We were very strategic. We would get a brief on where we were going to land and where people were going to be, and we would go in the middle of the night. So we had the advantage. We had night vision on, we had IR on, we had drones above us. So, we had all the technology, and the Navy SEALs were there a lot of the times too. And sometimes we would take a back seat because the Navy SEALs were there. The Navy SEALs would go in and handle their business and we would make sure that nobody flanked them from the other side, and, but the missions that we were the primary, we would land in the middle of the night and get to go. and we would get to go and then fly on a Black Hawk or a couple Black Hawks or a Chinook and land outside of it, take maybe a 10, 15 minute hike and go get the person that we wanted to get, and whether it was dead or alive, we were getting them. And, sometimes it didn't work out that well. Sometimes it worked out flawlessly. Sometimes we were able to get to the point to where nobody even knew we were there. And sometimes we got to the point where as soon as we got into the village, they had people waiting and it was like they almost knew that we were coming, and maybe we just landed a little bit too close, but we never did hot drops or anything like that, which is awesome. It wasn't like the Vietnam War or rappelling out of a helicopter in the middle of a war zone. It's not like that. We're about a click out at least and landing, and hiking in and with drones above us and making sure that we're coming in at a certain point. And then we would have the drone get ahead of us and scope out the village. And, we'd have sniper teams behind us. We would have all our assault teams in front of them, and we would go make shit happen, as you say. So, but I got exactly what I signed up for. That's what I thought I was going to do in the first deployment, right? And then funny thing is, when you sign up for it, that's what you're going to get. And, that is the deployment that put it all in. It was like, man, I did all this to become this person, and now I don't even want to be this person, and was it worth it? I think it was worth it. It was good. It was,
from my perspective, which is just from what I've heard in the last hour, is how this story started, which is a kid that gets dropped into an unfamiliar place. So it sounds a lot familiar from that respect, right?
Yep.
That doesn't have a lot going for him, that's trying to avoid going down a road, to now somebody that made somebody or starting to make somebody of themselves, that's pressed themselves not to just be in the military, but to take on the duty of going into a combat zone, to take on, hey, I'm going to push myself further and become a ranger. Like, so you see the development happening here, right? Which is this person that's now more disciplined, that's you got some things under your belt now, like you got momentum, in terms of like what you're accomplishing as a person. And so then you go through these experiences, now you come back and you got some tools now, right? Like, man, you've done some stuff, you've got some wins under your belt. Where do you feel like you take that? Did you feel like you had momentum? Like, you're like, hey,
I felt like I was on top of the world when I was a Ranger. I felt like I was one of the most important people in the United States.
Right.
Like I was literally part of groups that were getting the most high value targets that you can possibly get. Not Osama bin Laden or anything like that.
Right.
Maybe the Jack of Cards, maybe a queen, or a 10 of spades.
Yeah.
Like I was getting good target. We were getting people that were trying to harm U.S. citizens actively and
Right.
and were in charge of terrorist groups. Like we were not, and I got what I signed up for. I said, but I think the most important thing is the way I look back at it is like, what could I use in my everyday life that I did when I was there? Absolutely nothing, unless somebody invades the United States and I need to, do my thing. It's not going to do any good for me.
I think those skills, Brett, but like what I'm more so thinking about is the underlying skills, which is like the discipline, this idea of self-worth. Cause you just said that, like, dude, I was a Ranger. Like, so now you got a lot of confidence, right? So those are the things that are transferable, right? Yeah. So you're back now and you're like, okay, you've done some stuff, you've got some momentum. Now you're going into the professional world, I'm assuming. And I know we're fast forwarding a bunch, but like just to kind of get to it, is amazing that you got to serve your country, that you did the things that you did to protect America and its freedoms. But now from what I see from you now, right, which is, I still see you not satisfied, right? And we talk about, the one thing we do talk about is, hey, I just took this job at this role at this company, and I see what you're doing, which is like, you're trying to progress. You're trying to find that place that, you can really make a name for yourself. So a lot of the same, I didn't know nothing about your military experience, but I'm hearing the same story being told. Now we're in a civilian world, but a lot of the same parallels in that sense, right?
Yeah, a lot of trying to climb the ladder as fast as possible.
Exactly.
Right? And
it's the same thing.
And trying to make a name for myself. I think that's probably the easiest way to put it because it's almost like a trend, man.
Yeah.
I want to be, my wife asked me all the time, like, are you okay with that responsibility? And I'm like, yeah, like, why not? You know? And a lot of people don't want to take the next step in life because they're scared of the other side. They're scared of the responsibility, right? And they think it'll ruin them, or it'll make it to where it's like, it's too much or something like that. But I don't view it like that, man. I view it as like, this, even the where I'm at right now, I do project management for construction. I have an office job now, but I never, ever am satisfied. I
Yeah.
always want to be doing something better. I always want to strive for doing something better because, I mean, let's face it, I'm 34 years old. I still have a lot of things that I want to accomplish. I want to provide even more for my family, just like every single other person. I want to make a name for myself. I want to leave something for my children that's better than what I had, right? And I think that's where my drive comes now, is from my kids, man.
So now we're talking about something where we can actually have similarities that we can actually connect on. Yeah, we finally got, because everything else could not have been. It was hard. Like, how do I contribute to this? Because anything I'm going to say is going to sound extremely trivial as compared to what Brett was doing. But no, I think that's what this is about too, right? Which is like, it's exactly that. Which is, I haven't gotten into a lot of this yet, but I mean, doing exactly what you're doing, which is, I have a full-time career, but I've tried and failed at a bunch of things professionally as well. And I'm almost 40. I got 5 years on you. I'm almost 40. I'm going to be 40 this year. It's that's one thing I like about that friend group is I think we're all similar. And like you said, I think a lot of people are like that. I think it's just to what degree are you willing to go to sacrifice to really, like I said, with you've bounced to a couple different companies. It seems like you kind of found your footing with where you're at now. I was looking at your LinkedIn. I'm like, holy shit, who's this guy? And like, nice looking professional photo. And I was looking through your resume. I'm like, damn, dude, this guy's got some stuff going on. So it's really cool, man. So I think that's awesome. I think the last question I have for you is, as it relates to your family. So I kind of, at the beginning, I shared a story with you about how my dad talked about his military. Again, he was not in combat, but is very proud, and as well he should be, for serving his country in the Marine Corps. He's got the globe and anchor tattoo on his arm, and he still hangs out with his military buddies. In fact, he's in Fiji right now hanging out with a guy that he went to basic training with, right? Like, he's, like you mentioned earlier, like, these are guys that it might have been 2 or 3 years out of his life, but they're in his life forever. Like, they're brothers, just like you said. And so my dad made that a part of my life because, like I said, and my siblings, where he just would talk about, he wouldn't get into this detail and things like that, but just the pride of being in the military. So as you think about that with your kids, like, have you kind of thought about how you want to share your military experience with your children? And like, what do you think that's going to look like?
I don't know. I haven't really put much thought into that. I think he'll figure out what I've done, what type of person he is, but whether he hates it or he loves it. But I want him to take the good out of what I've done, right? And I want to share those experiences with him and kind of pass along that side of it.
Right.
But I don't want him to ever join the military.
Yeah. So coming full circle, right? So now
I don't want him to do it.
And that's like, have you thought about, let's fast forward 15 years. If that conversation were to ever come up, like, what's your response to that? Like, is there a world in which, like, is it like with you and your mom where he may just, hey, this is something he really wants, he's going to defy you and just do it anyways? Is there a world where you go like, hey, son, like, okay, like, I got to support you? Like, I know we're 50, I'm thinking way out, but just want to come for a circle on this.
This is a great question and something that I thought about. It's hard because when your dad was a military guy and you were raised kind of that way, you said it yourself, you wanted to join. And then your dad was like, no, and would I support it? One, it depends on the time. I don't know what 15 years looks like or now, if we're going to be in a war or, what he's going to want to do. And what I would say, I would support it if it was something that led to his career being better in the civilian world, because that's one thing that I regret, the fact that I did all that stuff. I left the military and it did absolutely nothing for me. Absolutely nothing. It gives me a paycheck from the military every week or every month, like I said earlier, but it did nothing for my career because I didn't go into that. I didn't become a civilian contractor because I wanted to have a family. I didn't go make $200,000 a year in a foreign country and operate over there with people like back in the day, like Blackwater or anything like that, because of the fact that I wanted to have a family. I knew what I wanted again. Remember, it's the same concept. But for him, obviously, I know his mom wouldn't want that. I would support it. Like I said, I would support it only if he was doing something that wasn't just run and gun related.
Right.
If it was an engineer, specialized, something that is transferable.
Or like maybe an officer, like going in as a...
Yeah, going in with education, going to West Point or something like that. Cool, yeah. and whatever. Would I recommend that? No, officers not my favorite person, but whatever. I mean, officers are a good profession. They make a lot more money, but at the same time, it's like, unless it's transferable, don't do it, man. That's how I would look at it. For my daughter, hell no, you're never going in that. I'll make sure of it. So yeah, I mean. To end this, would I say let your kids join the military? I I wouldn't recommend it unless it's transferable, but your kids are going to have to make their own decisions. Right. And like you said, you're 40 years old and you've done this, that, and the other. And I'm 34 and I've done A, B, C, and D all the way to like freaking H or I or J or, and I still have to get to Z. Right. And, but you have to have failures and you have to learn. And I think that's the most important thing is like, I learned from my mistakes. And that's one thing that I want to teach my kid is to learn from his mistakes, man, because it helped me.
Brett, thank you for your service and what you've done for our country. And it's going to go enjoy the rest of the Saturday. Let's finish these beers up.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I got some golfing tomorrow, so I'm stoked. I'm maybe have some friends come over. So
all right, man. Talk soon.
All right, man.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
The Rockies ain't too far from here if we drive